evening and welcome, and thank you all for coming. Thanks also to the East Hampton Library, and particularly to Stephen Dino Spataro, because without his expertise and support, we wouldn't have these Zoom events. And for me, they've been one of the unexpected gifts that have come out of this COVID experience. And I hope we can continue them onward going forward. So I discovered four quartets at a transitional point in my life, and it became a touchstone in a pretty intense time for me of personal transformation. And in 2006, I closed down a very busy, demanding retail gallery and design showroom that I ran and owned in Manhattan. And I'd gotten all the success I wanted and came to a kind of, is that all there is moment? So I came out to the beach, I closed it down, came out to the beach to take a few months to kind of meditate a little, reflect on what I was going to do next. Well, that turned into a 3-year meditation retreat, which became a journey and a wake up that really changed the course of my life. And during that time, I began writing poetry again and other creative pursuits, which I hadn't done since my early 20s. And the four quartets was both inspirational and instrumental in that for me. I consider this poem to be one of the great masterpieces of transcendent literature. And it's clear to me from the work itself that it came out of Eliot's own direct experience of awakening. And the intention and promise of this program for me is twofold. First of all, to unpack what's considered a very dense and difficult work and make its considerable gifts accessible to us. And more important, I see as the larger mission of poetry, which is to inspire us to extract the gold in it for ourselves, to live a more vibrant, creative, and peacefully supercharged day-to-day experience of life, freedom and fulfillment in our own lives. The work has gotten a lot of recent attention because it's relevant to our time. You know, as we move out of COVID and back into the world, we'll be entering and participating in what will be a global renaissance, which historically has been the result of collective shared experiences of loss and trauma. And the four quartets were themselves a product of that shared collective global trauma, all written in the years preceding, in the run-up and during World War II. The work was originally published in 1944, right after the war, when the world was digging itself out. And Eliot himself had completed the quartets right before, in 1942, shortly before the end of the war. And at that time also, he was in a rescue unit, helping the dead and the wounded during the Blitz of London. So for him, it was a very transformative time. Before that time, his work was kind of cynical and rather frosty and a bit harsh. And he went through a transformation himself. And as we'll see, we'll go through the poem, we'll see. And I see us using this lockdown time as an opportunity to prepare ourselves and our psyches and our emotions for the explosion of energy and opportunity and creative emergence that will follow this pandemic. So let's jump right into the quartets. So poets leave kind of trails of candy clues, beginning with the epigraph and the title. And Eliot quotes the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus in his epigraph. So I'd like to read that to you. It gives us some clues as to where Eliot's going with this. Although logos is common to all, most people live as if they had a wisdom of their own. The way upward and the way downward are the same. So let's just jump right in here. Beginning with the first quartet called Burnt Norton. And before we start to unpack it, I'd like to give you a little background so that it will be an easier thing to absorb on the first reading. So relevant to our moment in time, as I said, he began writing this before the wars, during the run between the two world wars, when authoritarianism and prejudice were fermenting and heading toward totalitarianism. And his work in the four quartets, which was published after World War II, is about hope and fulfillment. It's a vision of redemption, complete opposite to his earlier work. And it's full of paradox. It finds wisdom and redemption in an ultimate reality that unites dualities and reconciles opposites in oneness. And this is a very prevalent popular conversation in popular culture today, actually, in our time. So first of all, why four quartets? Well, Eliot shared with his great friend, Stephen Spender, the English poet and essayist, about the perfection of Beethoven's quartets, the transcendent perfection. And he wanted to create a poetic version of that transcendence before he died. That was his goal. So that brings us to one of the recurrent themes of the quartets, which is music. It's made up of 4 poems, and each poem follows a quartet form of 5 different movements, 5 smaller poems within each quartet. And each movement has a specific tempo, a rhythm and a mood, a kind of verbal music. And it's fitting that the poem is based around musical pattern, because pattern and music and dance are some of the themes running through the poem. And we'll point the themes out as we go along to give you a clear understanding of what you're hearing. So the movements are a sonata, a rondo, a theme and variations in the third. And the fourth movement is a pure transitional device to the last movement, which is the sum up and culmination of the recapitulation of all the themes in that particular quartet. So it's an allegro, an andante, minuet, scherzo, and rondo. And the theme of the poem is set in several contrasting rhythms throughout the poem. He juxtaposes passages of high lyric intensity with others of conversational comment and reflection and so on. So each poem refers to a different place and place in time. The first poem, Burnt Norton, is set in an empty old manor house in Gloucestershire, England, that Eliot came upon in the summer of 1934-35, where we can assume he had, from the poem, we can assume that he had a profound spiritual or enlightenment experience there. And each of the poems has a sort of relationship to various elements. Burnt Norton is related to air. And it's related to time. One of the major themes of this particular movement and throughout the poem is time. And this movement is about the dazzling present, where present, past, and future are balanced against the eternal. And so, so let's just begin. Let me just get this pulled up here. And if anybody has any questions or comments during this, just put it into the comments and into the chat, and we'll see it. Burnt Norton. And I'm going to name normally when it's read, I'm going to name that these things are not numbered, the numbers are not given, but I'm going to give you a sense of what number we're listening to. So I will tell you what number each one is. So this is 1. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. If all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable. What might have been is an abstraction, remaining a perpetual possibility only in a world of speculation. What might have been and what has been point to one end, which is always present. Footfalls echo in the memory down the passage which we did not take, towards the door we never opened, into the rose garden. My words echo thus in your mind, but to what purpose? Disturbing the dust on a bowl of rose leaves? I do not know. Other echoes inhabit the garden. Shall we follow? Quick, said the bird, find them, round the corner, through the first gate, into our first world. Shall we follow the deception of the thrush into our first world? There they were, dignified, invisible, moving without pressure over the dead leaves in the autumn heat, through the vibrant air, and the bird called in response to the unheard music hidden in the shrubbery, and the unseen eye-beam crossed, for the roses had the flowers, for the roses had the look of flowers that are looked at. There they were as our guests, accepted and accepting. So we moved, and they, in a formal pattern, along the empty alley into the box circle, to look down into the drained pool. Dry the pool, dry concrete, brown-edged. And the pool was filled with water out of sunlight. And the lotus rose quietly, quietly. The surface glittered out of heart of light. And they were behind us, reflected in the pool. Then a cloud passed, and the pool was empty. Go, said the bird, for the leaves were full of children, hidden excitedly, containing laughter. Go, 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 said the bird. Humankind cannot bear very much reality. Time present, time past, and time future, what might have been and what has been, point to one end, which is always present. 2. Garlic and sapphires in the mud clot the bedded axle tree. The trilling wire in the blood sings below inveterate scars, appeasing long forgotten wars. The dance along the artery, the circulation of the lymph are figured in the drift of stars. Ascend to summer in the tree. We move above the moving tree in light upon the figured leaf. And here upon the sodden floor below, the boar hound and the boar pursue their pattern as before, but reconciled among the stars. At the still point of the turning world, neither flesh nor fleshless, neither from nor towards, at the still point, there the dance is, but neither arrest nor movement, and do not call it fixity where past and future are gathered. Neither movement from nor towards, neither ascent nor decline. Except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance. I can only say there we have been, but I cannot say where, and I cannot say how long, for that is to place it in time. The inner freedom from the practical desire, the release from action and suffering, release from the inner and outer compulsion, yet surrounded by a grace of sense, a white light still and moving, a Hebung without motion, concentration without elimination, both the new world and the old made explicit, understood in the completion of its partial ecstasy, the resolution of its partial horror. Yet the enchainment of past and future, woven in the weakness of the changing body, protects mankind from heaven and damnation, which flesh cannot endure. Time past and time future allow but a little consciousness. To be conscious is not to be in time, but only in time can the moment in the rose garden, the moment in the arbor where the rain beat, the moment in the drafty church at Smokefall be remembered, involved with past and future. I'm going to leave that there now, and let's just try and unpack this a little bit before we move on, because to listen to it all at once might be kind of overwhelming. And we'll see as we move forward what your preferences are, whether you want to hear it all in one piece or want to kind of dig into it as we go. But the themes of this first quartet, Burnt Norton, first of all, it's a specific place. It's an empty old manor house in Gloucestershire that Eliot came upon in summer in 1934, 1935. Well, we can assume that he had a profound spiritual or enlightenment experience. And one of the themes running through this work, and particularly introduced in this first quartet, in this first section, is the dazzling present, where present, past, and future are balanced against the eternal. He says, if all time is eternally present, where reality and possibility are balanced against one another. He talks about what might have been and what has been, and they live in the present, both past and future, and point to one end, which is always present. So this is the conflict. This is a Platonic conflict between eternity and time, between what is truly real and what has merely the appearance of reality. So this transcendent paradox of time and timelessness, its illusory nature, the redemption it carries is woven throughout this poem. And right off the bat, the speaker wants you to understand and accept the fact that the past, present, and future are not three different times. They're all the same, because time is a single seamless fabric. And in fact, if we look at it from a really logical perspective, we only have the present. So anything that we're looking at in the past is a story about the past. We think they're memories, but they're stories that keep changing. And we have our future happens in the present, in thoughts about the future, ideas about the future, what the future is going to be, but actually none of it is real. The only thing that's real is right now, right here, right now. And Eliot is pointing to living this moment in the present, the greatness of the present moment right now, and how we get lost in the past and the future and literally lose the content of our lives. So he's trying to show us this experience of enlightenment, but he has a tough time doing it in words. And he simply cannot get through to us sufficiently that the future, we avoid the future, we avoid the present and worry about the past and the future because we know it's going to end. We're going to get older and die, and our time on earth is limited. But we obsess over the past and future. And if we're going to start living in a constant spiritual present moment, we're going to have to get over this fear of death and aging, the obsession with past and future. So going to the experience in the rose garden, Eliot's pointing out that stillness is not stasis. There's resonance in everything. If we view even dead objects, we see rampant, joyful movement. Everything is sentient, aware, and vibrantly alive. And in this section of the poem, in the garden, birds speak to us. Roses have the look of flowers that are looked at. Leaves are filled with laughter. And it's pointing to us the emptiness of modern life and the disconnection with nature. One of the symbols in the poem recurrently is roses. And it's kind of a double-edged symbol. On the one hand, roses represent love, rebirth, and the coming of a better time. And at the same time, the rose bowl is full of dusty rose leaves, dried up rose leaves. So this idea of the human in the natural world are roses. The roses are the dreams that we haven't fulfilled. Those roses represent those moments where we grabbed the golden ring and enjoyed our life and fulfilled our life. So we hear these echoes of nature trying to draw us out of our sad modern lives. So I want to move now to the second section here, which is number 2. Garlic and sapphires in the mud clot the bedded axle tree. The trilling wire in the blood sings below inveterate scars, appeasing long forgotten wars. The dance along the artery, the circulation of the lymph, are figured in the drift of stars. Ascend to summer in the tree. We move above the moving tree in light upon the figured leaf. And here upon the sodden floor below, the boarhound and the boar pursue their pattern as before, but reconciled among the stars. At the still point of the turning world, neither flesh nor fleshless, neither from nor towards, at the still point, there the dance is, but neither arrest nor movement, and do not call it fixity, where past and future are gathered. Neither movement from nor towards, neither ascent nor decline. Except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance. I can only say there we have been, but I cannot say where, and I cannot say how long, for that is to place it in time. The inner freedom from the practical desire, the release from action and suffering, release from the inner and outer compulsion, yet surrounded by a grace of sense, a white light still and moving, a Hebung without motion, concentration without elimination, both the new world and the old made explicit, understood at the completion of its partial ecstasy, the resolution of its partial horror. Yet the enchainment of past and future, woven in the weakness of the changing body, protects mankind from heaven and damnation, which flesh cannot endure. Time past and time future allow but a little consciousness. To be conscious is not to be in time, but only in time can the moment in the rose garden, the moment in the arbor where the rain beat, the moment in the drafty church at smokefall be remembered, involved with past and future. Only through time, time is conquered. So he's taken us through this transcendent vision that he experienced in this strange house that he just visited, where he found a resonance that really triggered this entire set of poems. And this last section here was an attempt to speak of that experience, the experience of transcendence, where all time stops, and we are in the present moment, absolutely engaged, absolutely full, a Hebung without motion, concentration without elimination, both the new world and the old made explicit, understood at the completion of its partial ecstasy, the resolution of its partial horror. So without being able to experience it, we're able to visit it in his language and possibly find it for ourselves. Only through time, time is conquered. This is another example of the paradox here. Time doesn't exist, and at the same time, we can only make sense of everything and anything through time. So this third section, the second section here, he took us into a moment of transcendence, a moment of ideal experience. And this third section here is a very different kind of mood. Here's a place of disaffection, time before and time after in a dim light. Neither daylight, investing form with lucid stillness, turning shadow into transient beauty with slow rotation, suggesting permanence, nor darkness to purify the soul, emptying the sensual with deprivation, cleansing affection from the temporal. Neither plenitude nor vacancy, only a flicker over the strained, time-ridden faces, distracted from distraction by distraction, filled with fancies and empty of meaning, tumid apathy with no concentration, men and bits of paper whirled by the cold wind that blows before and after time. Wind in and out of unwholesome lungs, time before and time after, eructation of unhealthy souls into the faded air, the torpid, driven on the wind that sweeps the gloomy hills of London, Hampstead and Clerkenwell, Camden and Putney, Highgate, Primrose and Ludgate. Not here the darkness in this twittering world. Descend lower, descend only into the world of perpetual solitude, world not world, but that which is not world. Internal darkness, deprivation and destitution of all property, desiccation of the world of sense, evacuation of the world of fancy, inoperancy of the world of spirit. This is the one way, and the other is the same, not in movement, but abstention from movement. While the world moves in appetency on its metalled ways of time past and time future. What Eliot is saying in this passage, he's comparing this modern, cold, harsh existence, appetency, a world of appetency, just comparing it to that time in the garden. We've kind of lost our connection as human beings. We've lost our connection with our Eden, with what was natural to us, and we're living this industrial, cold, empty life that he sees, that Eliot sees as really destructive to our being. So he talks about the gloomy hills of London, and he talks about this twittering reality where everything is on the surface. But really the real danger is going lower, the world of solitude, internal darkness, deprivation, destitution of property, desiccation of the world of sense. In other words, disillusionment, and the place that really was the war, where the world had really found its nadir in all of the evils that human beings do to each other, and which we're sort of seeing today in our own time. We'll talk a bit about that later. But at the end, he talks about this way of living and the world in the garden is actually the same. One is movement and one is abstention from movement. And the world just moves on, with or without us, on its ways of time past and time future. So what he's trying to tell us here is that the choice for us is the same. We are going to end up in the same place no matter what. So choose what your experience is going to be, because we're going to end up in the same place. We move on to section 4 here. Time and the bell have buried the day. The black cloud carries the sun away. Will the sunflower turn to us? Will the clematis stray down, bend to us? Tendril and spray, clutch and cling. Chill fingers of you be curled down on us. After the kingfisher's wing has answered light to light and is silent, the light is still at the still point of the turning world. We'll move right on to 5. Words move, music moves, only in time. But that which is only living can only die. Words after speech reach into the silence. Only by the form, the pattern, can words or music reach the stillness. As a Chinese jar still moves perpetually in its stillness. Not the stillness of the violin while the note lasts, not that only, but the coexistence, or say that the end precedes the beginning, and the end and the beginning were always there, before the beginning and after the end. And all is always now. Words strain, crack, and sometimes break under the burden, under the tension, slip, slide, perish, decay with imprecision, will not stay in place, will not stay still. Shrieking voices, scolding, shrieking voices, scolding, mocking, or merely chattering, always assail them. The word in the desert is most attacked by voices of temptation, the crying shadow of the funeral dance, the loud lament of the disconsolate chimera. The detail of the pattern is movement, as in the figure of the 10 stairs. Desire itself is movement, not in itself desirable. Love is itself unmoving, only the cause and end of movement, timeless and undesiring except in the aspect of time, caught in the form of limitation between unbeing and being. Sudden in a shaft of sunlight, even while the dust moves, there rises the hidden laughter of children in the foliage. Quick now, here now, always. Ridiculous, the waste, sad time, stretching before and after. So I'd like to open it up a little bit and ask if anybody has any questions or comments or thoughts that they'd like to share.
Dealing with the paradox of duality, that there's time and yet it's timeless. Life is timeless, and yet we live in time. So it's all paradox and duality. And so deep. It's so deep.
Yes, yeah, yes, yes. It's so deep that it's almost impossible to count.
It's very Buddhist.
It is very Buddhist, yes.
And I use phrases often when I have to give a talk.
Yeah.
Because I'm also fascinated with time and the paradox of past, present, and future being in this moment.
Yes, yes, yeah. Yeah, very much so. And he was very much, Eliot was very much involved with Eastern mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
Norton and Eastern.
Yeah.
He was
Mm-hmm.
So yes, very much so. And something that is very much in the popular imagination. You know, it's really something that has taken over the world, and we're really engaged in worldwide right now in our common popular culture. It's become quite a part of our conversations.
We have an observation from Andreas. Is life like running on a treadmill with the past behind and the future forward so we run faster or slower. Do we run faster or slower or not at all?
And this is very interesting because he's talking about this. He talks about this in this first quartet. One of the themes running through the four quartets is dance. And he talks about movement without purpose. So jogging, for example, or running on a treadmill is a movement with purpose. But dance is a movement without purpose. Dance is a movement that brings us into the present moment, into an almost unconscious connection with the present moment. And this is part of his thematic, the group of themes that he's, music, dance, a movement with no point to it, except just the experience itself. And that is part of what he's talking about, is that freedom from practical desire, you know, freedom from the quotidian grind, from the obsessions, from the things that keep us moving forward in our mindless day-to-day rush to get through the time that we have, you know, on the planet. So, yeah. Carol, I lost you. I had a little computer crash there. I lost you in the middle of your comment when you commented earlier. Could you say a little more about what you were?
Well, I was talking about his obsession with time, but one other observation, I'm not exactly sure how to put it, but the poem seems almost like a paean to actionlessness.
Yes.
That action will not help us in our journey, time past, time present, time future. In other words, I sense a passivity. And I don't mean that in a negative sense,
Yeah.
but that what we're looking for is not going out and fighting wars or being successful or whatever, that it's someplace else.
Yeah, and it's more of an embrace and acceptance and surrender to the present moment, to the moment, to this moment, to fully experience this moment, without thinking about the past, without remembering the past, without obsessing about the past, without thinking about the future. And also movement, movement without purpose, but movement for the sake of the experience of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still that that action that keeps us engaged. It's not passive. It keeps us engaged in the moment, and in the moment without stretching. You know, that passage at the end. You know, the time ridiculous, the waste sad time, stretching before and after. You know, he's talking about we're wasting our lives in the past and in the present and the future.
Mm.
The glorious present, you know, this dazzling present is in front of our eyes.
Is there any deity that you can feel in all of this?
For myself, I see it more as more of a Buddhist, more of an Eastern. You know, he was very religious, Eliot. You know, he was a Church of England.
Yes, I know.
American Church of England, Anglican.
Right.
And so he was almost more Catholic than the Catholics, you know. But at the same time, he embraced Eastern mysticism as well. So he really embraced all of it. From my perspective, you know, from my study of Buddhism, I see this poem really as a treatise on the Buddhist philosophy of emptiness. You know, it's all of the principles he's talking about, all of the ideas that he's digging into are really parts, really the principles of the philosophy of emptiness, the Buddhist philosophy of emptiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I feel that very much. I was surprised.
Yeah. Yes. Does anybody else have any thoughts, questions?
We have from Andreas, if we all don't obsess about the past or future and become passive, where do we end up in terms of humanity given various systems in place? Capitalism, communism, etc.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think again, this is part of the paradox, because only through time is conquered, right? It's the paradox of being human. Animals don't have the problem, you know, but we have memories and we have intelligence that, you know, in which we live in concepts of time. So I think Eliot is talking about not necessarily obsessing about the past, and in fact, obsessing about the past takes us out of that experience in the moment. That experience in the moment where we are free to really explore and express ourselves in our lives and actually create real accomplishment. You know, while we're obsessing about the past or the future, we can't live and fully engage creatively in this present moment and use this time right now, you know, rather than obsessing about what happened yesterday or tomorrow. You know, you can sit down and write a poem today, or do a painting, or start a business, or, you know, fulfill your passions. So I think it's more that it's not about rejecting the idea of time and the necessity of living in time, but it's more about taking our attention away from the present with what might happen in the future, or what has happened or might have happened in the past.
We have John asks, let's talk about the children.
Oh yeah, the children, absolutely. Oh my God, yes. Well, this was my clue when I first read this poem, "The Children in the Foliage," because when I had that 3-year, when I did that 3-year meditation retreat, I really dug deeply into Buddhist experience. And when I began to have direct experiences of what you might call spiritual awareness or awakening or enlightenment, the first thing that I was here, and I have lots of trees around me in my house here, but the first thing was seeing those trees come to life. And they weren't, you know, bark and leaves anymore. They were living, vibrant, joyful beings. And so Eliot's beautiful way of expressing that, the sound of children's laughter in the foliage, is just, to me, it really nails the whole experience of an awakened life. Going back into Eden, really, expressing life, the world around you, as a kind of heaven. And that is what Eliot is talking about being in that present, that dazzling present, which is, and And the bird says, humankind cannot bear very much reality. What he's saying is that this is true reality. The world that we're living in, you know, the world of the factories and the offices and the bypass and we're not living in reality. The real reality of this planet, of this world that we're living in, is the music of the children in the foliage. Yeah.
I raised the comment because he comes to it twice, of course, and it's hidden and it's in the foliage. So as you point out, it could be the sound of the trees themselves reminding him of laughter, or it could actually be the laughter of children. And it's the only joy that I really see in what we've read, which you thought that, another paradox, the only way to be happy is to be childlike and not think so much.
Yeah, I think that's probably one way of seeing it. But in that, there's the passage in there where he talks about, let me just pull it up. At the still point of the turning world, neither flesh nor fleshless, neither from nor towards, at the still point, there the dance is, but neither arrest nor movement. And do not call it fixity, where past and future are gathered together in this moment, this one present moment in time. So neither movement from nor towards, neither ascent nor decline, except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance. And he's relating, actually, in this passage, his experience. I can only say there we have been, but I cannot say where. And I cannot say how long, for that is to place it in time. So this is the kind of experience where time disappears, where time stretches. It's actually what we would call today being in flow. You know, there's a lot of obsession in the culture today about finding flow, getting into flow, maintaining flow. And this is what he's talking about. This is the experience of flow that he's talking about, where time, our experience of time disappears. It either it feels like it's stretched for hours, or it feels like it was a few minutes. And this is what happens when we're fully engaged in flow, fully present in the moment, in the present moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are closed.
Oh, all right.
We have a question from Carol. I like the idea of surrendering to the present moment to be more free. The past and future are distractions, focusing on now. And children don't dwell in the past or future, right? They embrace the moment.
Yes, yes. And also, by the way, artists are the same. Artists have been able to retain that childlike ability to be in the moment and to express creatively in the moment, and at great price often, you know.
Does anyone have any other questions or comments?
I might say something.
Sure.
I was thinking about our more contemporary Nobel laureate, who said, "Out to the windy beach, beyond the twisted reach of crazy sorrow, to dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free, all memory and fate driven deep beneath the waves. I'll forget about today until tomorrow." There you go. There's the same theme.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And there we are, Dylan Thomas, Nobel laureate. And you know what I got to say? I prefer that statement to the Sphinx's Book of Riddles that is Eliot. Although I enjoy Eliot's language. I love Eliot's language. I love the way you read it. But I think I would take Dylan Thomas more or less over the Book of Riddles. It's
Okay.
nice to talk about.
Yeah. Are you talking about Bob Dylan or Dylan Thomas?
Oh, sorry, Bob Dylan.
Okay, because
Didn't he take his name from Dylan Thomas?
Bob Dylan song. But yeah, he
Yeah.
got his name from Dylan Thomas anyway. So yeah, and
Oh,
Dylan
God,
Thomas,
yes.
great, you know. But he found his moment in a bottle, sadly. So it kind of changes the equation a bit. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you mean Thomas Dylan?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, he died in America, right? But
Yeah.
no, I was talking about Bob Dylan, our
Yes,
recent Nobel laureate.
and really a genius, you know, a poetic genius.
It seems to me he talked about what you said, not what you said, but Eliot said, in a way more lyrical, more striking, more memorable, broader to reach more people than even Eliot,
Yeah.
at a
Well,
different level.
yeah, and he was a product of his time. You know, he spoke the language of his generation, of our generation, you know. So it was a different kind of rhythm, a different kind of language. And Eliot alludes to that, you know, the rhythm and the dancing and the
Oh,
music, you know, he alludes to, you know, we live in different kinds of rhythms through time.
well, Eliot was much closer to Bob Dylan when he wrote Jail for Prufrock, in the sense of language and sense of
Yeah.
just, I don't mean to hog this, but just one simple question.
Yeah.
Had Eliot joined the Anglican Communion when he wrote, was this the time he'd already joined the Anglican Communion when he wrote 4 quartets?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not much in there from that.
I know. That's really interesting, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it really is much more Eastern.
Yeah. And yet he had gone through this whole soul-searching Anglican Communion. I mean, boy,
right.
for an American, that's like, well, he wasn't American anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think he really, embraced and absorbed his Englishness. You know, his English history, his English background. You know, centuries before. Yeah. Yeah. It's
well, thanks. I love this.
He enthusiastically dug himself in, you know, in England. He was pretty much like I've dug myself in America, you know. So, yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Yes. Let's see.
He does make a reference directly to religious belief, potentially, in saying that the enchantment of past and future woven in the weakness of the changing body protects mankind from heaven and damnation. Those are clear.
Yeah. And those are very
cannot endure, because of course it can't. It's dead when it occurs.
Yeah, yeah. But he speaks a lot throughout the 4 quartets of ideas like Christian ideas like heaven and damnation and so on. So yes, yes.
I thought we were going with the prior comment about Dylan Thomas was something like Fern Hill, which is a beautiful poem of childhood recollected when he was older. Now, as I was young and easy under the apple boughs, about the house and happy as the grass was green, time let me hail and climb, golden in the heyday of its eyes.
And Carol, yes, and I love that passage from Thomas. It's really beautiful. And of course, you know, he's similar to Yeats in that way too. You know, his history of Wales, his that deep mystical history that really lives in the landscape in Wales. You know, he absolutely embraced that. Yeah.
Yeats' Dancer in the Dance.
That's right. Well, yeah, and Yeats with all of that Irish mysticism in his work. Yeah. So yeah, let's look. yeah, Carol is talking about surrendering to the present moment, focusing on now. Yeah. And of course, Eckhart Tolle, of course, created a whole, you know, a whole oeuvre out of now, out of the power of now.
Andreas writes, by doing in the moment as a result of past or future concerns, we are stealing by doing in the moment. In addition, hold on a tick, by doing in the moment as a result of past or future concerns, we are stealing from being in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes. And, you know, sometimes it's possible that we're kind of building on something and moving back into the moment, you know, building on something that we've been working on too. You know, a lot of this is really about actually living a productive life. It's these time-wasting reveries and complaint and regret and imagination about what might happen, you know, that really rob us of what we can produce and create in the present, of our life in the present. And I think that post-industrial revolution, we've been trained in schools to become productive creatures, you know, productive cogs in the machine. And we've lost our connection to our own imagination, to our, you know, before the 19th century, everybody lived in their own villages. Everybody was an entrepreneur, essentially. And we began to be educated to be part of a large enterprise, be the fodder for larger enterprises. So we've been conditioned actually by our education, post-industrial revolution, actually not to be in the moment.
Does anybody have any other questions for this evening before we close out this evening's event? I just would like to thank Pauline for being able to present this.
Can you hear me?
Sure.
I have a question. Pauline,
Yeah.
what is this reference to? It's right, let me see. It's in the last stanza. It
Yeah.
says, the detail of the pattern is movement, as in the figure of the 10 stairs. I was wondering if that's something that means something, or could it be any 10 stairs, or is there, you know, I know, you know, 10. Do you think it refers to anything specific?
You know, I've wondered about that, and I was actually going to look that up for this evening, and I didn't. And I'm going to, because that stumped me too. But this is a beautiful passage, this last stanza. Words move, music moves only in time, but that which is only living can only die. Words after speech reach into the silence. Only by the form, the pattern, can words or music reach the stillness, as a Chinese jar still moves perpetually in its stillness. And, you know, he's talking here about resonance, about that which is only living can only die. In other words, there has to be more to it than just living this sort of finite life and then dying. That which is only living can only die. He's talking about a different kind of resonance. And, you know, a Chinese jar, an antique Chinese jar, beautiful antique Chinese jar, as we all know, has resonance. It is perpetually moving in its stillness. It doesn't, the resonance doesn't go away. And the same is true of music. The same is true of art, painting, sculpture. The same is true of dance. So he's talking about a kind of resonance, not the stillness of the violin while the note lasts. So the violin is still, but the note that it produced is continuing to reverberate through time. And, you know, potentially endlessly, according to quantum science, right? So he's also talking about coexistence, how the end precedes the beginning, and the end and the beginning were always there before the beginning and after the end. And all is always now. So it's all one moment. He's talking about the entirety of time being one endless moment, which is very much a Buddhist idea. You know, this huge, endless, unending, no beginning, no end moment where everything happens. And, you know, this, I love this section, word strain, words, you know, the insufficiency of words. Words strain, crack, and sometimes break under the burden, under the tension, slip, slide, perish, decay with imprecision, will not stay in place, will not stay still. It's really the detail of the pattern is movement. As in, I want to look it up. I want to look up the figure of the 10 stairs. But
you say that that reminds me directly of Picasso's painting, Nude Descending the Staircase. If you look at it, it's broken into approximately 10 frozen images of women in abstraction descending the stairs.
Yes, yes. I'm definitely going to look it up.
You know, my impression is of the whole first effort here, or whatever we call first movement, is it's almost like this is a poet trying to be a physicist, or it's poetic physics. It's like he is truly grappling with every dimension, and you know, when you mention Picasso, it's like he's creating a refraction. I'm not sure I'm saying the right word. You know, he's flattening the surfaces of every one of these dimensions that govern us, and it's refracted like a Picasso painting in a way. Right. So it's like he's like a poet being. When I say trying to be a physicist, I'm not trying to berate him in any way. But to me, it's like the irony of a poet trying to grapple with the physics of reality.
Well, this brings up a really interesting point, which I hadn't touched on yet. And thanks for bringing it up. Don't forget that Eliot was writing in this very, very rich time in the early part of the 20th century, where Einstein, theory of relativity, contemporary philosophy, just all of these contemporary art, abstraction, modernity in furnishings and architecture, and underlying a lot of this was quantum physics. You know, all the discoveries of quantum physics. So it was very much part of his time, very much a part of his time. And the other thing is that when we look at quantum physics, for those who have been involved in Eastern philosophy, what we discover is that what they've discovered through science in quantum physics, the seers and visionaries of the past several thousand years already knew from direct experience in enlightenment, states of enlightenment. They already knew all this. And so it took quantum physics for our Western minds to wrap our heads around it, you know, which is really kind of amazing.
Am I on?
Yeah?
Can you hear me?
Yeah?
Okay. You may not have to get that sophisticated to understand the 10 stairs. In the decimal system, it begins with 0, and then it completes with another 0, and it begins again with a 0 and goes to another 0, and begins with that 0 and goes to another 0. It's forever starting again with nothing and going to its conclusion.
Okay.
Fanciful, fanciful.
I like it. I like it.
Fanciful, yeah. I mean, it's a decimal system that informs everything about our time and technology and science and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you're religion, you're 3. If you're science, you're 10.
Yes. 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 Well, if you're Western religion, you're 3.
Yes. Yes. True. Yes. Yes.
In your Eastern religion, you're 1.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Or unspeakable.
Yeah. 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 Well, anybody else have anything to say or share or
I have a question. What's Erebung?
Erhebung. Okay. Yes. Erhebung. I actually looked it up. So it's the German word for just that sense of transient peace, that just this sort of a still moving, not still, but resonant. Yeah.
Is it like meditative?
Yes, 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 yeah. You know, and without motion, he actually defines it, you know, in the passage.
And what's eructation?
Eructation, it's actually out breathing. So he's talking about the eructation of people breathing in and out, you know, in the gloomy hills of London, right? You know, people breathing out their spiritual illness into the air, polluting the air with their spiritual sickness, you know, breathing out, polluting.
Eructation of unhealthy souls. That makes a lot of sense now.
Yes, yes, into the
How timely.
into the torpid air. Yeah, yeah.
But through the wasteland, he keeps repeating Shante, Shante, the peace that passes understanding. It's the exact same idea.
Yes.
Shante, Shante, the peace that he repeats it after every.
Yes. Yes.
So we're not going anywhere new here.
Yeah. Well, I think this was his in his later work anyway, the overriding theme, I think, of his life.
Peace.
Yeah.
Beyond peace that could not be articulated.
Yes.
Fully.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, sort of the sensibility of a spiritual master. You know?
Yeah. Well, after I've had enough whiskeys, I find that too. I have a peace that I just can't extract it at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are more ways.
A stillness without stillness.
Yeah. As the Maharaja says, truth is a jewel of many facets.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, but
that's good.
I enjoyed this very much. You're very wonderful, beautiful, beautiful reading. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It's this poem is very close to my heart, and don't ask me why. Just
well, I've heard a lot of your poetry,
over the head.
A lot, and I suddenly realized what the inspiration was. Just as almost everything I write comes from Yeats, so much that you write comes from right here.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, it's funny because all of the readings that you hear, you know,
Yeah.
of the poem, they're all these very fusty, crusty, very British sort of, you know, kind of.
Yeah.
And so I think it's nice to get a more contemporary reading of this poem. Jeremy Irons didn't do a bad job,
Mhm.
but it's clear from all of them, and even Eliot's own reading, they don't read it like they understand what they're talking about.
Eliot's funny when he's reading.
They
Yeah.
just recite it, you know.
Yeah, I know.
without
It's funny
any
when he's reading.
knowledge of like, what the hell does this mean, you know, that I'm saying, you know. So
It's almost like they're afraid to pretend they're trying to be dramatic and they're just reading it in a certain voice to
that's
not
right.
pretend to be poetic.
With
And they missed something because Dylan Thomas didn't try that and he won the whole world.
yes.
Anyway.
Yeah. Nice. So guys,
Thank you. Thank you, Pauline.
I thank you for attending tonight, and I thank you, Pauline, for presenting
Thank you,
this
Pauline.
wonderful presentation. And we'll be back again at the same time next Wednesday at 6 o'clock for the second part of the 4 quartets for East Coker at
Excellent.
6 o'clock.
Yeah.
And
East Coke is a very different kind of poem. So it's very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the whole thing unfolds as it goes forward. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Pauline.
Okay. Thank you, Carol.
thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.